What if Gojo had dodged? You know, we're here in caught off guard Kaisen, but what if he wasn't? What if he had dodged? What would have happened? Let's talk about it. Okay, first, for anybody that missed it, what am I talking about? Well, recently Gege Akutami revealed that the world-cutting slash that ended Gojo's life, he actually could have dodged, and he was just caught off guard in that moment, surprised by the fact that Sukuna could bypass the Limitless even with Maharaka dead. So, what if Gojo hadn't been caught off guard? What if he had dodged that world-cutting slash? What would have happened in their fight from that point forward? Gojo wins. Gojo wins that version of the fight in that sequence of events. And before people start screaming in the comments, let me just remind you guys my general stance on Gojo and Sukuna, and that is that they're equal. Either one is capable of beating the other, but Sukuna got the better of Gojo with his intellect, right? By capitalizing on that moment where he was caught off guard. Sukuna won, okay? But in this sequence of events, Gojo would have won. Now, I'm going to explain why two different ways. The first way, and the more important way, in my opinion, is a writing standpoint, okay? Gojo and Sukuna were the two pinnacles of strength in Gege's world. He wants to make this climax entertaining, right? That only works if they're roughly equal. Neither one was clearly dominating the other. But the way this fight went, Gojo was standing strong in this moment. Sukuna was literally on his last leg. Exhibit A, right? And this moment works because tension had been built to its greatest point. All of the air was reaching the maximum capacity of the balloon, and then boom, in one fell swoop, we go from this moment to Gojo's declaration of victory to him in the airport dead. Right? This only worked because Sukuna caught not only Gojo off guard, but Gege caught the readers off guard, just surprising us with that this next panel. The fact that Gege chose to use that route shows that this was the pivotal moment and the moment that mattered in the battle. The moment where Sukuna got the better of Gojo. That moment just does not work. It loses all of its steam if we assume that had Gojo dodged, that Sukuna was still going to easily win that fight. The point was, his back was in the corner, and it was a last-ditch effort to catch him off guard. Now, I know people are going to argue with what I'm saying there, but before we get into the power scaling side of things, just try to see the narrative side of things here. The whole reason that moment was such a climactic and pivotal moment was because it's what he needed to do to win. If we strip that away from it, it's meaningless, right? And I know, like, I'm saying things that are, like, obvious here, but a lot of people won't admit this. Like, this storytelling moment, the reason Gege ended the fight this way proves that it was the way that Sukuna had to win. If Sukuna could have won a different way, Gege would have written it that way. Does that make sense? So the story happening that way, combined with Gege's comment saying that Gojo was caught off guard, cements this to me. Like, that was the way that he decided Sukuna would have to win this fight. Meaning, in the hypothetical world where Gojo dodges that last-ditch effort, he's going to win. So now let me explain why from the power scaling standpoint. First of all, I would like to resubmit Exhibit A. Exhibit B is that this is the version of Gojo that version of Sukuna was having to fight. The narrator literally tells us that his voltage was amping up from hitting black flashes. And at this point, Gojo had hit a total of 4 black flashes to Sukuna's 0. Due to Gojo getting amped up and having his output restored in this way, he was now speed blitzing Sukuna and literally manhandling him. Sukuna could not react in time to defend himself from this black flash and was only saved by Maharaka. There's a reason that the Gojo amped up panel was paired with the panel that mentioned Sukuna felt uneasy for the first time in a millennia. Again, on a level playing field, I think these two are equal. But this version of Gojo is absolutely eclipsing this version of Sukuna. He was already eclipsing the stronger version of Sukuna before he took a hollow purple that had 2 allies helping him, right? So if Gojo dodges this last-ditch effort slash, he is easily beating Sukuna from there. But manga, you're forgetting about Sukuna's true form transformation. If Gojo had dodged the world-cutting slash, then Sukuna would have just transformed and reset the fight. They would be on a level playing field once more. And no, they wouldn't. I didn't forget that, I just don't think it's relevant. A lot of people overestimate what exactly this true form transformation does. All it is a new body, okay? It is not a full heal or a full refresh. Sure, he's got the extra arms and the extra mouth, the body perfect for sorcery. He's going to be having a field day with hand signs and chants, which he's going to need since he has to do that for all the world cutting slashes from here on out. But again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't help him in this set of circumstances against this Gojo because the new body does not heal him like internally. It does not give him back his RCT. It does not give him back his domain expansion, and it doesn't give him back his output. So he is still in the slums of output compared to a Gojo. Again, compared to the Gojo that was literally speed blitzing and manhandling him. So even though he's got a fresh exterior, Sukuna was still that worn and torn, beaten and battered, mentally exhausted guy beneath the veneer of his new sumo suit, right? And we basically know it works this way because Megami was stripped out of it at the end of the series and his true body was still there. So Sukuna still had all of that brain damage. Again, didn't have his RCT, didn't have his domain, and didn't have his output. All he had was a new coat of paint. And to be clear, I'm not saying that's nothing. It's enough for him to handle everyone else in the verse, but it's not enough for him to handle a surging Gojo. Now, I know some people just aren't going to agree with my premise, even though we know that Sukuna didn't get his RCT back and he didn't get his domain back from that transformation. Some people will still say that he got his output back. But if you're not going to take my word for it, let's take Akotsu's word for it, where he says here, if it weren't for the after effects of his battle with Gojo Sensei, we wouldn't have a second to spare to use our reverse curse techniques. He would have annihilated us in an instant. Meaning, if Sukuna was at his full potential, he would have one-shot all of them, yet he couldn't because he was so weakened from his fight with Gojo. So if Gojo doesn't let his guard down and he dodges that slash, he wins. And for anybody who's mad at this take, don't be mad at me, be mad at Gege for writing it this way. And you know what, Sukuna fans, just don't even get riled up in the comments because Gojo did let his guard down, he didn't dodge the slash, and he lost. Sukuna won. He proved that he was better in this moment. He bested Gojo by not only recognizing the opportunity window that Gojo gave him by being egotistical in this moment, but he also was smart enough to create the perfect binding vow in that moment to seize that opportunity. And I know some people get mad that like a fight of this magnitude would boil down to something like a sneak attack, right? But that's what it has to boil down to when you're talking about a battle between two gods, right? If one just stomps the other, then it was never an interesting fight in the first place. It comes down to these little nuances, these genius strategies that they try to employ to one-up the other, like Gojo's Hollow Purple or like his impromptu world-cutting slash. But anyways, to circle us all the way back around here, had Gojo dodged that, he would have won. And big shout out to Antoine and Flash who asked me to talk about this today. Now, I probably shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to hopefully head off some comments I know I'll get. But just because Gojo would win under those hyper-specific conditions we've been talking about does not mean that Gojo is unequivocally stronger than Sukuna and beats him in all theoretical matchups. Again, I think the two are equal, and it comes down to the nuance and the interesting strategies that they would employ, but ultimately it comes down to the narrative, right? Gojo was never winning this fight in any universe because that's not the way the story was going to go. But on that note, Lucifer asked me what if Sukuna had used his true form from the beginning. Like he was true form Sukuna, but also using Maharaga and the 10 Shadows and everything, right? And it's an entirely different fight, right? Because what does that exactly mean? Is Sukuna still employing the same strategy where he is intentionally trying to adapt and still develop the world cutting slash? Because if so, I think the fight pretty much goes the exact same, right? I don't think Sukuna having 4 arms and 2 mouths makes like that much of an insurmountable difference in how that fight progresses. However, if Sukuna is using an entirely different strategy, like he doesn't care about adapting, but he's just, 3v1ing Gojo in his true form with Maharaga, like who knows what that might look like, I would say that Sukuna would likely win, again, because of the story needing Gojo to die, but I don't think Gojo can't win that fight in a vacuum. I think he's got ways to win. It's really just a what if game and people building their own scenarios. But if you're going to force me to pick, I'm pretty much always going to go with Sukuna in these scenarios for the reason I talked about in this video from last week, where I talk about the real difference between Gojo and Sukuna and why Gojo lost. And to me, it's an ideology thing. Sukuna was always the king of fighting for your own strength. Anyways, it's been a hell of an agenda Kaisen these past few days, which has just been a lot of fun. I've missed the true lobotomy of the JJK community. Hopefully, when season 3 comes back, we'll have it all fresh and anew. And we've got more probably to come out from this exhibition Q&A as well. And as soon as we get that, I of course will be updating you guys, but I would imagine there's going to be no statements that really rile stuff up like this Gojo dodging one. But as always, y'all, thanks for watching.